Okay, so we've talked about some general strategies for the listening test, as well as the question types you're likely to see. In this video, we're going to briefly touch on some strategies for each listening part. Let's start with listening parts 1, 2, and 3. The first 3 parts of the listening test contain 1 question per screen, like this. In addition to this, you won't actually be able to read the text of the question, you'll only hear it. Therefore, pay careful attention to each question. As we discussed in a previous video, you should also keep an eye on the timer. You'll have between 25 and 30 seconds to answer each question, and if you've got any time left over, you should consider double-checking your answer before clicking Next. Remember, after you click Next, you can't go back, and you can't carry over any extra time. Now let's get into some specifics for each of these parts. In listening part 1, you'll hear a conversation between 2 people, and this conversation will be split into 3 sections. Between each section, you'll answer 2 to 3 questions. The important thing here is that these questions only pertain to the section you just listened to. For example, if you're answering a question for the second section of the conversation, don't worry about details from the first part. One last thing. Listening part 1 is about problem solving. The 2 speakers are talking about how to resolve a problem that one of them has. Try to listen for this problem and any solutions they mention. These will likely appear in the questions. Listening part 2 is also a conversation between 2 speakers, but this time, the conversation is only in 1 section. Also, there's not necessarily a problem to solve. Instead, the speakers are just having a daily life conversation. Again, try to listen for the main ideas that they're talking about. Listening part 3 is similar to the first 2 parts, in that it's also a conversation between 2 speakers. One of the speakers has some sort of specialized knowledge that could help the other person. Try to identify the role of each speaker as you listen. This will help you on the questions. Okay, now let's talk about listening parts 4, 5, and 6. These are a bit different than the first 3 parts. To begin with, all the questions for each of these parts are presented on a single screen. You'll be able to answer these questions all at once. Again though, keep an eye on the timer. If you've got any time left over, double check your answers. These questions are multiple choice as well, but this time, you'll select each answer from a drop-down menu. In these later listening parts, you may hear words that you don't understand, and in some cases, this may make it difficult to answer questions about specific information. If you listen carefully though, you may still be able to answer questions about general information. Listening part 4 is a report about a local news item by 1 speaker. Try to focus on the W questions as you listen. Who? What? When? Where? Why? These concepts may appear in the questions. Alright, on to listening part 5. This is probably the most unique listening part because it's presented as a video instead of an audio clip. As such, there are some special things you should consider. As you watch, don't worry about specific things like colors or tiny items of clothing. Instead, keep in mind the speaker's expressions and tones of voice. This listening part is a discussion between 3 people who have different points of view about something. Who disagrees with whom? Does anyone look particularly excited or frustrated or happy? The intention here isn't to test you on what you see in the video. Rather, the video is meant to help give more context to the discussion between the 3 speakers. Okay, last listening part. In part 6, you'll hear another report by 1 speaker, this time including multiple points of view on a controversial issue. So what should you focus on here? Aside from thinking about the W questions, you should try to focus on what these different opinions are. Who believes what and why? These ideas will likely appear in the questions somewhere. So to sum things up, knowing what to expect on the test can really help you perform at your best. Familiarize yourself with the format of the questions on the listening test. Keep in mind the question types we discussed in these videos. Before your test day, Make an effort to review both the general listening strategies as well as those that can be applied to specific parts of the listening test.